On our call today, we are fortunate to have Dan Rush with Lincoln. Dan is an executive director of Lincoln. He's been with the firm for over 16 years. Dan is a second-generation service professional, as his father was also in the industry. He's been a great partner of ours in helping our members meet their financial goals and needs. As I mentioned, Rick Lowell and I are 2 of 8 advisors with Coastal Wealth Management. We have an average of 10 years or more experience on our team. Evelina Katzlap is responsible for putting together the presentation, and we thank her for that. Evelina is our operations manager. Evelina could not do this without Tiffany. Tiffany is part of our financial well-being program. She's been with Coastal for a number of years. If you would like an appointment after the presentation or would like to reach out for further information, Tiffany would be your go-to person. Sam Bogocek will be our resource for assisting if you have any problems during the presentation with either hearing or seeing the presentation.
At this point, Catherine and I have turned over presentation rights to Dan, and we're just going to wait a moment until he gets his presentation up. Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Thanks, Evelina.
Evelina, can you hear me? And Catherine?
Yes.
All right. And are you seeing my screen properly?
I am indeed, yes. And if any of our guests do not see the screen correctly, please private message Sam, and he might be able to assist you. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you so much, Catherine, Evelina, and the whole crew for having me on today. And good afternoon to everybody. Thank you again for having me. I would like to walk everyone through a piece we put together earlier this year during the throes of this COVID epidemic called Confidence in Times of Crisis. We figured everyone at the time could probably use a little boost of confidence during that time, hence the title that you see today. When trying to gain perspective on today's environment, and more importantly, where we're headed, we found it often helps to look back in time and see what we've been through, and more importantly, how have markets and the economy responded. And so let me see if I can turn this slide. There you go. And first off, let me just start with a few words around Lincoln. I mean, we've been around, as you can imagine, for quite a while. And over the last 115 years gives us a lot of experience in dealing with all kinds of different environments. And in a world that is rapidly changing around us, embracing confidence and lessons learned from the past experiences has never been more important. As you can imagine, we were named after Abraham Lincoln, one of our nation's greatest leaders and founders, on ideals of dependability, honesty, and integrity. And we've spent more than a century delivering on those past promises and enriching the lives of all of our customers. And as we navigate and learn from the past, we take action, and it definitely shows. A good example is if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, you will see back in the 2008 crisis, how much we had. We had $170 billion in assets under management and $5.1 billion in capital. Over the last, 10, 11 years, we've increased our assets under management by $100 billion and our statutory capital by $4 billion. Now, again, that may not mean much to folks that aren't looking at insurance companies on a regular basis, but the reason we do that is because we found that when times get tough, our customers want to make sure we have plenty of capital on our balance sheet. And not only has that done well and played well for our customers, but as you can also tell with the rating agencies, Lincoln has also got some of the highest industry ratings there are. Probably one of the things I'm most proud of is what Forbes has said about us, as we were ranked as the #1 insurance company for customers. So what does all that mean for you? It simply means that you can feel confident that Lincoln is strong, especially when it matters. Let me out of this.
It is possible that we may have lost Dan's audio. Apologies, everybody. Dan, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and exit the event and come back in. At this time, we'll get Rick to go ahead and proceed with this particular slide. So come back in, and hopefully we can get you back up and running. Rick, would you go ahead and just start off with this particular slide?
I can start a summary of this, yeah, Evelina. So
excellent.
One of the things Dan was going to talk about here is overcoming adversity. And it's important to understand that over the last 100 years, we've seen a lot of ups and downs, a lot of volatility in the market. And I think it's important for a lot of people to realize that what we're going through right now with the global pandemic is not the first time we've seen this type of volatility. We've seen a lot of it since 1905. And Dan's going to highlight here a lot of the instances where we've seen a lot of ups and downs in the market, dating all the way back to World War I. I think if we think back to as early as the Zika outbreak in 2016, the swine flu back in 2009, we can probably remember the type of panic and uncertainty that was going on in the world. Understanding the bear markets, we've had 25 different bear markets, which a bear market is defined as a 20% market decline since 1929. Going back to the global financial crisis back in 2008, which I'm sure a lot of us probably remember that, we were involved in that. This whole crisis, the next bull market, the upswing on that global financial crisis, we saw a bull market of 326%. So while, Dan, are you back with us?
I am back.
Hey, I'm going to let you take over then, Dan.
Yeah, I am so sorry, everyone. Of all these WebEx type meetings, I've never had that happen before.
You're just practicing, Dan. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, the good news is Rick did a great job just right in.
Yes, you did. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for your patience. Let's keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, and we have seen a lot of markets like this, and more importantly, epidemics. And as Rick was pointing out, one thing I look at when we look at the last 25 bear markets, and you see 12 of them that are highlighted on the right side of the page, is the fact that the media would probably have you focus your attention on the bear side of the market. And as we know, investors, especially our financial advisors, we want to look at the entire scenario. And if you look at the bottom on the averages, the average bear market drops about 42% and stays down from top to bottom about 22 months. But what most people don't look at too often is the recovery side of this. And this is where we get the optimism, is the average return of the markets when the markets do turn around and go back up is 161% and lasts almost 3 times longer than whatever the duration of the bear market that occurred. And so it's really important to have the perspective of, listen, we all know markets are going to go down. We don't know when and we don't know why. But when we look at the full cycle, the returns are significantly better when you weather those storms, just like what we went through this year. Evelina, if you could turn to the next page. And again, we have no idea what's going to happen with, this current environment. But if we look back over the last 20 years, this is some recent history. How many of you can remember where you were on 9/11? I think every one of us can vividly remember exactly where we were. And so if we go take a couple of, a view of what we've already been through, September 11th, we had the worst terrorist attacks ever in our country's history. The market shut down, travel stopped, tourism, all of the hospitality industry froze. We had military action going on in Afghanistan and Iraq. Within 2 years, the market was back above those original levels. And by 2007, it was up another 34% on top of that. If you fast forward from 9/11 to the 2008 and 9 financial crisis, right? One of the worst downturns we've seen in the economy and the market since the Great Depression. The market dropped 57% over the course of that year. And at the same time, and this was some information I guess I remember, but it didn't seem like it was highlighted in the news as much back then, probably because of the financial crisis. But we had the swine flu epidemic taking place as well. There were over 60 million cases in the US and worldwide. There was 274,000 people hospitalized in the US. and over 12,000 deaths. And despite all these crises, the reality is the markets and the economy recovered. Matter of fact, it went on from the 2008 to 2009 to over 178 by the end of actually last year. It was almost 200% return from that downturn that we went through in 08 and 09. You get to today, with the COVID-19 outbreak, clearly one of the worst epidemics and pandemics we've probably ever seen. But fortunately for the U.S., we entered this crisis with a very healthy economy, a strong job and labor market. And so, long-term impacts, we don't know, but history reminds us that we will respond and we will recover. A good example of this year's crisis, the market from top to bottom dropped 35% in the matter of a month, which was unprecedented. What was even more unprecedented was that we had a full recovery, which from the drop up was 53% in under 4 months, which we'd never seen before. So sometimes we will be in for a wild ride, but history shows us that if you stay the course, you have a good plan, you've got good financial advisors that are there to help you see through it, you can weather all of these storms. If you can turn to the page, Evelina, to the next one. And so what we find is your response when markets go crazy, like we've seen, your response matters. We know there's going to be short-term disruption in the markets. Here's a good example. If we went back to 2008 and that 9 crisis, when the market dropped on the far left, right, 40, 50%, as a client, you've got 4 different options or responses that you could take. One would be the apprehensive client. That client cashed out when the market got rough, and their $10,000 investment today is worth $6,515. They went to cash and they never got back in. And unfortunately, there was a lot of Americans that did that. The uncertain client, they got out and said, I'm going to wait till things get better. They waited till the second quarter of 2010 and got back in, and their $10,000 today is worth 17. The steady Eddie client that just hung on for the ride, they've doubled their money from 10,000 to 22. And the opportunistic client, the client that when the market was down and they talked with their Catherine or their Rick and said, hey, the markets are on sale, the markets are off, now's the time to probably put some money to work. They added another 10,000, and as you can see, their account value is now 57,000. So as we know, actions always speak louder than words. And if you turn to the next page, Catherine, I'll just wrap up with this. Regardless of how the world changes around us, the best decision you can make for your future is always to remain optimistic. And we know that working with Coastal and your financial advisor teams that you guys have in place, they are those people that are always optimistic and can walk you through whatever the environment or situation that we see. So with that, Rick and Catherine, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you guys so much for having me on today. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Hey, Dan, not a problem. Thanks for going through that. One of the things that I wanted to real quickly point out to everyone on the call too is our financial planning process. So Dan alludes to having the right people in place to help you get through these turbulent times. And one of the things that we do here at Coastal is we try to walk all of our members through the financial planning process. It's a member benefit. There's no cost to it for our members. But we really believe that the process is the key to success. And one of the things that's going to happen, if you were to call Tiffany and say, hey, Tiffany, I want to have an appointment with Rick or an appointment with Catherine, we're going to ask you to fill out a fact finder, a profile, and we're going to ask you about your personal assets, your income, your liabilities, your debt, your insurance. And then we're going to meet with you, and we're going to ask you about your goals. What do you want to accomplish? When do you want to retire, and what kind of income do you want to have come in? We're going to take all that information, and we're going to compile it. We're going to analyze it. And then we're going to come back to you, either face-to-face or virtually now, and we're going to have some observations about where you are right now in life and how much of a probability of success, a successful path that you're currently on. And we might have some observations about how to tie up some loose ends. The financial planning process after that doesn't really stop. It keeps going. Every time we get together, every time we meet, we're going to review the financial planning process that we originally did and see how far we've moved the needle. How much closer to the goals are we? So we're in this together. You, me, and Catherine are going to figure out how to get you from point A to point B financially. Evelina, you want to flip to the next slide? So we do have a lot of webinars coming up. You can always go to coastalwealthmanagement24.com to see what we've got in the pipeline. We are constantly adding new content. And you can also, now that we've started to record these webinars, you can get onto the website and look at all of our past webinars too. They're very informative, and I would highly suggest you try to do it. With that, we are going to turn it over to Q&A. If we've got any questions from the audience. Did anything come in, Catherine?
We do have one question. Thanks, Rick. I can present it to Dan. And the member is asking, is it better to try, given the market ups and downs that we've seen and that you just highlighted in the slide, is it better to try to time when to get into the market, or is it time in the market that you would recommend?
Catherine, that is a great question. And I think many investors have the same thoughts when the markets, especially when we've seen the level of volatility that we have seen recently. What we believe is that is definitely time in the markets. If the best investors on the planet, the Warren Buffetts of the world, don't time the market or can't time the market, we don't think most clients and investors, especially, if it's we would call your serious money for retirement, you definitely don't want to take those risks. And so we've got, programs, as you all can use, things like dollar cost averaging that take advantage of the ups and downs of the market and give all of our clients a much more consistent, experience.
Thanks, Dan. And I think that's it for our questions. Coming into the queue, unless there is any other questions, I think that's it, Evelina.
All right, everyone, I want to thank you for showing up today. And before we log out, I want to let you know that we're going to be sending out a survey for everyone in today. We would absolutely love your feedback. This is how we get better at these things. For participating in the survey, you're going to be entered into a chance to win a $50 Amazon e-card. We're going to be choosing 2 winners at random. And we are going to contact you directly if you are the lucky winner. So thank you, everyone, for logging in, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. And once again, this is Evelina. I appreciate your patience through our little technical glitch. Tiffany will be sending you a copy of the presentation, and I should have that survey out to you tomorrow, no later than 10 a.m. Would definitely love your feedback. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.